Can he do it? President Biden has to reach and vault over a high bar of expectation tonight. His State of the Union address will have to make some Democrats more comfortable with his ability to finish out 4 more years. One political scientist puts it this way: the challenges that Joe Biden has within his own party, his own base, are the biggest challenges he's facing in this election. He has a lot of issues with younger voters in the party. I think that can be directly linked to what's happening overseas in the Middle East. That's one quote. And we're also seeing that play out in primary contests so far, where hundreds of thousands of Democrat voters in several states voted uncommitted or no preference over the president's policy on the Israel-Hamas war. Die-hard supporters, though, have his back.
We're a purple state. I'm not worried. I know what we got to do. We got to roll up our sleeves and do our job.
It's significant. I don't think, look, the president's winning overwhelmingly, and I don't in the primaries, and I don't think this is going to affect his vote total, but it is going to affect his turnout and base.
I don't think we should be concerned about this as a political matter. I would hope that the president doesn't make decisions about what to do in Gaza or the Middle East based upon how the votes line up.
Now the president is wooing Nikki Haley voters after she dropped out of the race this week. A campaign spokesperson said this.
I think Nikki Haley's voters have made it very clear exactly who they are. These are the voters who have agreed with Nikki Haley when she stood up to Trump. So if you agreed with Nikki Haley when she stood up to Trump for things like election denialism or the chaos and division that he represents, there is, in fact, going to be a home for them in Joe Biden's campaign.
Trey Gowdy, former federal prosecutor and host of Sunday Night in America. All right, set it up. It's the closing argument for President Biden.
Yeah, he's got 2 problems. He's got policy issues and he's got performance issues. So on policy, it doesn't matter if he sounds like Cicero tonight, which he won't, by the way. But if he sounded like Cicero, it doesn't matter to young people who disagree with him on the Middle East or other voters, other Democrats who disagree with him on other issues. Now, even if you agree with him on policies, he's got some performance issues. I mean, look, Democrats can say what they want, but success tonight is him just not screwing up reading the teleprompter. I'll guarantee you, if you polled House Democrats right now, they would say, let's go back to the days where we submitted the State of the Union in writing. Let's don't even have it live, because they're going to be as nervous Harris as Lindsey Graham in a spelling bee while they are listening to him tonight.
Does Lindsey know you feel that way about him?
I've seen his transcripts.
Oh, my goodness.
It's not just me that felt that way about it.
All right. Hey, I wanted to point something out. I asked from our team to look at this, just at the length of speeches. So the longest on record for the State of the Union, this is since 1964 on record, was Bill Clinton, January 2000, 1 hour, 28 minutes and 49 seconds. Obama was around a minute, $1:10 each time he did it. Trump was on the longer side, 1:22.25, an hour 22 in February of 2019, and around that for his others. Biden, the last time he gave the State of the Union, February of last year, it was 1 hour, 13 minutes. The bar is especially high because of the stamina that this is going to take.
Yeah, well, I would also tell him, as an old washed-up prosecutor, I've heard good speeches and I've heard long speeches, but I've never heard a good long speech. I mean, what is his purpose tonight? What does he want to communicate? He needs to communicate some level of mental acuity. That is his goal. Policy, no one is going to change his or her mind based on something that comes out of his mouth tonight based on policy. They want to know that he has the mental acuity to make it 4 more years. On the Republican side, people are going to be watching to see whether or not members or vaping or singing along with the songs or getting handsy with a seatmate. They want to see how Republicans, are they capable of acting like adults in public? So those are your reasons to watch the State of the Union. Does Biden fall asleep during his own speech, and can Republicans avoid being arrested? Those are the 2 reasons to watch.
All right. So I take it you were giving us examples of what can happen if he falls asleep. All right. So let's get to this. The White House.
Or go to Beetlejuice in Colorado. Yes.
Oh, goodness. The White House fired back after defense attorney Ashley Merchant testified yesterday about a meeting between District Attorney Fani Willis and Vice President Kamala Harris. Merchants cited evidence that Willis visited the White House in February of 2023. That's just months before a grand jury in Georgia indicted President Trump in the state's election interference case. Fani Willis is, of course, prosecuting that case and facing disqualification for misconduct because she was having an affair with the man that she hired as the highest paid prosecutor on the case, and it just gets more tawdry from there. We've all watched the drama play out. The White House claims the vice president was hosting an event attended by hundreds of black leaders and that she did not directly speak with Willis. Here's some of Merchant's very interesting testimony.
I did open records for the White House access, and we had records that Ms. Willis and the mayor of Atlanta were at meeting with the vice president. And he told me, you know, they met at hotels. He would go to her place. There was a period of, I think it's 15 or 16 days where he did not have a contract. Which also happened to be one of the times they were out of town. So they re-upped the contract. The cap was significantly higher.
So that was not the courtroom because that ended about a week ago. This is inside the Georgia State Senate special committee investigating Willis's affair with Nathan Wade. We showed you parts of this live. I just want to get your reaction to that, Trey.
I just want people to understand, Harris, that this is not the way 99.9% of all prosecutors in this country conduct themselves on either side of the aisle. These are politicians masquerading as prosecutors, and it will be the undoing of our justice system. Now, whether or not a judge finds that this is sufficient to disqualify the prosecutors, I'm not sure that helps Trump. I'd rather have two people who don't know what they're doing prosecute me than go find two people who actually do. The larger point is weaponizing our justice system, whether it's the federal or the state level, it will be our undoing. What I'd like to know more about are these meetings between Fani Willis or Nathan Wade and the White House, because that level of political coordination should discuss people of all political ideations.
Well, look, Brent Tolman told me yesterday, former prosecutor, I know you know him, he said that you could get to the end of this where you've got ethical crimes being committed. I mean, some of the things that they were doing really should not have been happening if, in fact, this had anything to do with a president who was pushing against an opponent. Like, was the justice system actually being used? He now has more questions than he's ever had before.
Well, Brett is right. What I would add to that is Fani Willis and Nathan Wade may very well have issues with respect to perjury. They may have issues with candor before the court. They may have Georgia bar issues. The question for President Trump and other co-defendants is whether or not the indictment is legally sufficient. And even if it is not, they're just going to go get another grand jury to indict him again. We got to fix the underlying pathology, which is a politicization of our justice system.
Trey Gowdy, thank you. Come back anytime, always.
Yes.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.